Hello again, this is Foghorn with another installment of Flight School Academics for this, the 26th of September 2950 or 2020 if you're stuck in the past. This presentation is part of an ongoing series of academics for the members of the Aurora Republic, the premier role-playing organization in Star Citizen. If you are new to the Aurora Republic or visiting for the first time, let me start by saying welcome. We are glad to have you with us and would love to hear more from you if you're interested in hearing more from us. We're a lawful good organization focused on role-playing exploration and social interaction and are currently active in recruiting on Spectrum and Discord. A couple of quick org announcements. Currently, our website, the awesomely bespoke website called aurorarepublic.space, is down for maintenance at the moment. Hopefully we'll have that up by tomorrow midday is what I am hoping. Also, in the Discord up in the Aurora Admin Comms section on our Discord, you'll notice that a channel has been added called Polls, and we have a poll up there. We're interested in seeing if getting some better data on when the best sort of start times for org events during a day would be. Notionally, Saturday for our for this event would be one example, but so please, when you get a chance, go in there and vote on your on what the sort of slot of start times would be best for you, so that we can follow that up with a more granular poll to maybe find out exactly what's best for most folks in the org as best we can. All right, that's it for that. We don't have any new members or citizens this week since the last time we did this. So rules of engagement, we are streaming this video on Twitch. There is a broadcast delay. So if you're in the academics chat here in Discord and watching Twitch, you probably want to deafen one or the other. I would suggest probably deafening Discord and just listening my voice coordinated with the presentation. If you do have a question, please feel free to unmute yourself and just ask it in real time on Discord, and that way everybody else can hear what you're asking too. I will monitor the chats as best I can for any questions you put in there, and I'll repeat them. Tonight we are going to talk about flight school. We're going to talk about stealth and detection specifically, which are kind of flip sides of the same coin. So we're going to talk about them together, stealth gameplay and the things that factor into detection. So the statistics that are involved with these things started coming into the persistent universe in 3.9, but none of the mechanics were being used yet. I think I actually mentioned that at one point during academics. However, 3.10, they actually added the mechanics that work with those numbers. And this entire presentation and everything is all garnered and researched from the works of Cameral, Photon Pulse, Jub, and the guys over at Legacy Fleet, who did an extensive amount of testing with all of these things and validating these numbers and all this kind of stuff. So you're going to see some formulas that have been reverse engineered through experimentation and are accurate because they've been verified. And like I said, it's pretty impressive that their work allowed us to put this in a compact format without having to do all that work ourselves. And I've seen their spreadsheets. Use their links onto their Google pages, their Google Drives, to see the spreadsheets that they put with all of the data behind this. So without further ado, we're going to go over the three factors that involved in both in detection and therefore stealth. We're going to show you the formulae for how to calculate out the detection range for your particular setup, any hull modifiers. We'll talk about those, and then I got some caveats and parting shots before we go fly. So just a quick brief on quick notes on the briefing that I'm doing here tonight. The first one I already made was that thank you to Cameral, Photon Pulse, Jub, and everybody else at Legacy Fleet who participated with those guys to get this done, because to get all this research done, because that was a mountain worth of work. First thing is that these mechanics came in with basically no notification in 3.10. They didn't put that anywhere on the roadmap. It didn't ever really get talked about in an ISC or any of that kind of stuff. So That's why it's all the way here at the end of 310 is when we're actually now briefing it, because first it took a while for people to discover that it was working, and then, you know, obviously a lot more time for all of those dudes I mentioned prior to actually do the testing and academic rigor behind it. So the information that I'm sharing with you is current as of 310. There are some holes. They will be obvious here as I continue to present where they are. And of course, so those will be filled in. I doubt the stuff that I present tonight is probably going to change in the future, if ever, but they could get tweaked a little bit. So we'll keep an eye on this as we go into the future. Also for the presentation, some terminology stuff. I'm going to say sensors. The use of the word radar or is passé even today. Current modern day fighters do not use only radar. Radar is only one of an entire sensor package that these fighters, 4th and 5th generation fighters, are equipped with. So, and it's only one small piece of a much larger puzzle. So it's they're even labeled in the jet on the switches. They're actually labeled sensor. Like turn them on. It's that power is called the sensor power panel, and it's actually labeled that way. So I'm not going to say radar unless I'm specifically talking about only the radar. And then use of the word scanner is like a Hollywoodism, and I think you guys all know my feelings on that. I'm not a fan of Hollywood people or Hollywoodisms, and scanner is a Hollywoodism, so I'm just not going to use it. I'm just going to use what I'm used to. So sensors. Understand what I'm saying? Sensors, I'm talking about radar, I'm talking about passive IR scanning, I'm talking about all that kind of stuff. The other thing is IR versus EM. We're going to go ahead and talk IR and EM in this because that's how Star Citizen does it. Even though anybody with a 7th grade physics education will tell you that there's no difference between IR and EM. IR is a subset of the electromagnetic spectrum, you know. So to differentiate between IR and EM is like differentiating between a poodle and a dog. So anyway, rant complete. The 3 factors that affect DTEC, of course, is Star Citizen, the electromagnetic signature that your spacecraft is putting out, and the infrared signature that your spacecraft is putting out. Those are the 2 things that you can affect as the pilot, because you can swap components out, go to stealth components that will lower that infrared signature and that electromagnetic signature. You can see these things in your spacecraft. They're down on the MFD, like it's a picture there on the right. It's also usually floating up underneath your own ship display in your floating visor up in the upper left. It'll be usually below that. And then below the blue line you see here is the thing that you can't affect, and that's what's the sensor size of the guy trying to detect you, because that's his spacecraft, so you can't, you know, you're kind of at the mercy of whatever he's got. Stepping back a half step back to the electromagnetic signature and infrared signature, those 2 numbers for the formulas that we're going to show here in another slide or two, whichever is the higher of those 2 numbers is the controlling factor. That's the one that the formula is going to be that's going to be affecting the detection range on you. So in this example right here, where EM is only 67 and IR is 2974, the IR signature is what's going to be detected first, and therefore the detection formulas that are coming up will, you know, you use the higher of those 2 numbers in all of these formula that are coming up. Okay, so remember that, to use the higher of the 2 numbers, the max, whichever one's the max signature. Okay, so here comes those detection range and formulae that we talked about. All right, so passive detection, at what range will they see you passively without doing an active scan ping? On a size 0 sensor package, then it's going to be 0.4 of whichever of those 2 is the IR or EM is your max signature. If it's a size 1, it's 0.5, and if it's size 2, it's 0.75. So you can see, as you can see, the bigger the sensor package, or the larger size sensor package platform that is looking for you, the farther they get to see, they can see you out there. Notice that there's not a size 3 listed here, and we'll talk about that at the end. They actually did go searching for size 3s, but apparently size 3 is not actually in the game at this point. Okay, so what if somebody actually actively pings for you? So this table is all size 1, so it's the same size sensor doing the look. But again, from that previous slide, a size 1 sensor with a passive detect will see you at 0.5, whatever that max signature between your IR and your EM signatures. If they do a 1x ping, then that active detect, the range of that active detect will be 1.0. It'll be exactly whatever that max signature is, just simply put a meters at the end of it. So if it's 2,468 the IR, and that's the max of the two, then 2,468 meters is where a size 1 will see you if a 1 times ping. Or in other words, it will be double of whatever the passive detect range is. A 1x ping will be double the passive detect. So if they zoom it in to do the 120x ping, so less broad but more focused pencil beam ping, then that will push that active detect range all the way up to 2.5 times your max sig. Or in other words, 5 times farther out than the passive detect. The thing to remember here, and they tested this with both size 1, size 2, and size 0s, and that relationship, or I should say this relationship here, the two times the passive detect range for a 1x ping and 5 times the passive detect range for the 128x ping, that relationship holds true across the sizes. So that's the hip pocket thing. Yeah, there's 8 steps between 1x and 128x, and so that means that each step is 3/8 of a passive. So if you care, but those are the two numbers just to remember in your head. Okay, at 1x I'm going to see twice as far as a passive, and at 128x I'm going to see 5 times as far as a passive, and everything in between there is going to be somewhere in between 2x and 5x. Okay, so there's some spacecraft out there that their actual space frames have been designed from the start to be stealthy, both in materials and in design techniques. So those have a hull modifier that further reduces that detection range. Here are the 8 spacecraft in the persistent universe now that have these features: the Eclipse, the Hornet Ghost, the Cardwall, the Mustang Delta, the Prowler, Razor EX, Sabre, and Sabre Raven. This list here in blue is in alphabetical order. That number to the right is the factor that is further multiplied to that range formulas from the past, from the last 2 slides. So if you go and you calculate what distance they're going to be able to see you based on the signature, either passive or active, then if you are flying one of these, that signature plus this, then you multiply that range by this fraction here, this decimal, which will further reduce. So in other words, rearranging that list in a descending order of factor, or in other words, more stealthy the farther down that list you go. So the Eclipse and the Prowler, which are the 2 stealthiest birds as far as space frame is designed, are the kingpins of stealth with a 30% reduction in detection range, or in other words, take the detection range and multiply it by 0.7 to figure out what that detection range will be. All right, so wrapping this all up with some caveats and things to remember, because it's not just the simple calculation of numbers. There's some other things that apply in here. Here's 4 things I'm going to talk about right off the bat: the startup IR, suppressing IR, powering systems off or stripping them off the bird to begin with, and then some server limitations that are kind of effing this whole thing up. Okay, so at startup, for some reason they decided that the baseline IR is higher than what the vehicle's baseline IR will be about half an hour later. So when you first jump in the jet, start it up, and if you did nothing other than just start it up, so everything's powered on, let the shield bubble build up to its max, but not take off and fly. So the jet is completely turned on, but it's just idle. You're not thrusting, you're not recharging shields, you're not shooting or anything, you're not spooling the quantum drive. The IR signature, if you watch that number, that IR signature will drop down to a minimum number and sit there. That's a baseline IR. However, as you sit there, you'll watch it'll start ticking off by one every few seconds slowly. And it takes about 25 minutes, and it'll eventually, that baseline IR will cool down to a much colder, a much lower IR signature. Obviously, anytime you do anything, you shoot a weapon, you thrust, anything like that, you're going to spike your IR up, right? Because you're using energy in one way or another. But then when you stop and you just let the ship go idle, powered on but idle, then very quickly your coolers cool the jet back down to that baseline IR. That baseline IR is lower 25 minutes after you very first start up the jet. I don't know why. I've heard a lot of people talk about different things about that, about why they think that is. They're like, oh, it takes a while for your coolers to do this and do that. And I'm like, that doesn't, that I haven't, as an engineer, I have not heard a good explanation as to why that is. But that's neither here nor there. The why is not really important. So if you are going out on a mission that you are going to need stealth, you need to not get detected, you may want to actually give thought to making sure you're not into the mission area where you need to not be detected for at least 25 minutes after start, so that you can actually take advantage of that lower baseline IR. And that will actually make you using a size 1, a small ship like a fighter as a test case. That makes a little more than a kilometer worth of distance, that 20 of detection range. It actually knocks about a kilometer, or a little more than a kilometer off of that detection range. So it's a way to stack the deck, maximum stack the deck in your favor. Suppress IR. Short answer is that thing's broken. It's never worked before, and it still doesn't work now. They actually tested this out rather extensively. They cannot find any negative effects on any of your vehicle systems when you hit suppress IR. It doesn't make your heat go up. It doesn't make any systems worse. So we're pretty sure that's probably not the design intention from CIG. And on the flip side, it also doesn't seem to do anything unless both the detecting vehicle and the target vehicle were spawned and owned by the same person. So, in other words, when Cameral was doing this test, and Cameral has 2 computers, 2 Star Citizen accounts, so he can do a lot of this testing by himself, because he can, on 2 different machines, go into Star Citizen on 2 different accounts, and so he's controlling both the target vehicle side and the detecting vehicle side of that equation. He was seeing suppress IR reduce the IR signature. When Jub did it with one of the other guys in Legacy Fleet, and in his org Legacy Fleet, and they did it, they did not. And so when they compared notes with Cameral, that discrepancy raised its head, and all 3 of them together went searching as for why. And this is what they figured out, was that, the suppress IR only reduces detection range if the one guy, if the both vehicles, the detector and the target, are both owned by the same person. So that's obviously also a bug. So the short of it is, suppress IR is completely useless. So don't even use it right now in 3.10. Suspect they will get it fixed sometime in the future. So that advice will change, I'm sure. Okay, so powering weapons down. So can I just power weapons down until weapons or shields or whatever, until I need them? And the answer is yes, that works. That does in fact lower IR and EM values, or even just stripping that component completely off if you're not even going to need it today. And the short answer is yes, those both work. However, the whole so can I just do I'm a piece of space junk if I go completely, just turn everything off, power down the whole ship? Could I just float by somebody? Hey, never mind me, I'm just a piece of space junk or another asteroid floating around out here. And the answer is no, that there is a minimum detection distance. Both space frames without any entities in them, and the entities, aka components, the components that are in them, all have this minimum base IR value. It's very small, but they do have this base IR value. So therefore, the the detection range will never go to zero because you're always putting out a little bit of heat no matter what. Yeah, there's a lot of, well, if something had actually been blown up and it was just salvage wreckage floating in space forever, it would eventually have no heat at all, or not, no measurable heat, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's true. But that seems to be a game design thing, that everything has a min value, so that there will be a minimum detection range no matter what, even when you're completely, it'll be super short, it'll be super tiny, they got to get on top of you before they see you, but there is a minimum detection range even when you're completely powered down cold. The other thing that they've discovered, and this was Legacy's fleet testing that they figured this out, is that pretty much across the board, actual stealth components powered on put out less signature than non-stealth components powered off. So if you're like, well, I'm flying a Saber and I want to keep my stealthiness, but I want the harder hitting guns and the more powerful shield, so I'll just keep those things turned off until I get close enough to start the fight and then turn them on. You're actually better off just to put the stealth components on, signature-wise, and just run them normally and go in with the guns and the shields already hot. I mentioned earlier, actually stripping a component off of the space frame to go fly does in fact lower your baseline. So if you can do without it and you really need to be stealthy, like if you're flying an Eclipse and your sole purpose in life is just get close enough to drop your torps into space and then turn around and run away bravely, then yeah, maybe you don't need those guns. Just take the guns off, and that will lower that min baseline IR. All right, lastly, this is probably what we call the limfac, the limiting factor of all of this. The current network architecture limits the maximum detection range for initial detection. And it's not part of the sensor gameplay. It's just the fact that your client side is completely beholden to the server for when the server tells it that there's another spacecraft out there. So even if those detection formula, if there's something big out there, there's a hammerhead or a Carrack or something, or a reclaimer, something that's putting out a massive signature that you should be able to see at 25 or 30 kilometers according to the formula. The problem is that the network architecture, OCS and bind culling and all that stuff, may not tell your client that it's there within that range until about 15 kilometers. So through their testing, they've been able to figure out that somewhere between about 12 to 15 kilometers is you're going to be, regardless of what the detection range says. If the detection range formula says you should be able to see it past 15 kilometers, you're probably not going to actually be able to detect it beyond 15 kilometers because OCS hasn't told your client that the thing's out there yet. It hasn't gotten close enough to you for it to consider, yeah, it's close enough that it's a factor and it needs to be in your gameplay, on your game board, so the server, aka the DM, hasn't reached down and pulled the mini out from behind the DM shield and plopped it down on the map in front of you yet to even go, to have a chance of detect. Okay, but that's only the initial detect. Once you do have this thing detected, then if you're tracking it with radar or whatever, then it's going to head on. If it heads out and is driving away from you, you will actually be able to hold that track out to whatever that calculated detection range from the formulas are. Once it's detected, once your client knows about it, he goes, okay, so that reclaimer is over there and it's driving away. That 890 jump is over there and it's driving away. Okay, so you'll be able to see it all the way out to 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers, 30 kilometers, whatever that detection formula says. You just may not see you may not get an initial detect until you're inside of 15 on it. So, come on, there you go. The other last thing is that the server condition itself seems to affect detects and active detects. And this isn't just sensing ships. This is kind of everything. People who like to go mining have figured this out pretty much. That you get on a fresh server that's running great, and you can see all the rocks everywhere within 15 kilometers of your prospector. However, as the server gets crappy and starts not running so well, then it seems to really start affecting particularly active detects. Passive detect still seems to work okay, but the active detects seem to be really be affected by the condition of the server. Whoops, wrong way. All right. So last thing of the parting shots here. You'll notice earlier we never talked about size 3 sensor platforms for the really big birds like the 890 jump, etc. From all of their testing, it appears that size 3 sensors aren't actually in the game yet, even if it says the ship's supposed to have it. They just seem to have exactly the same performance as size 2. Obviously, they just haven't gotten to it yet, is the way that would appears to folks. That seems to be the consensus. If you're flying one of those specialized sensor platforms like the Tracker or the Terrapin, those specialized sensors have not been put into the game yet. So you're just using whatever the plain vanilla sensor is for, those are fighter size things. So size 1, you're just using your standard size 1. And the last thing is, if you are playing stealth gameplay and you've done all this work to minimize your signature, you've put on stealth components that you minimize your signature, you've made all of these decisions, you've gone in very carefully, don't forget that if you pin or sensor lock somebody, not even missile lock, just sensor lock, if you pin or sensor lock somebody, you have now given them an indicator, even if you are outside their range to be able to detect you. The second you take anything past that little highlight, you bug them, then they're going to get that radar lock light's going to come on. They're going to know somebody's locked to them. They may not know who. So if there's other people flying around in a fight and you're sneaking in with your Eclipse, okay, you can probably get away with that because they're not going to know who it is and there's other people around her. But if they're out there all by themselves, fat, dumb, and happy, and you're sneaking up on them, think you're going to get in close and smack them with your torps out of an Eclipse. Think about when you're going to actually take the lock, because the second you do, a warning light is coming on in their cockpit to tell them that somebody is locking them. So that is it in a nutshell. Any questions? I'll tap dance for a few seconds here to beat the stream lag, and in case anybody wants to ask any questions about stealth and or detection. It's a lot of math very quickly. Okay.
What about bleeps, the sweeps, and the creeps?
Yep, the bleeps, bloop, bloop, the sweeps, and the creeps. Awesome.
I have a question about coolers. Does a bigger cooler put out faster or more or less IR?
You need to look at the numbers. Back before Urkel got his DPS calculator running and Hardpoint.io got up and running, we used to maintain a spreadsheet every patch that would come up that we'd look at and have all of that data of, what the cooler's capacity is, how fast does it cool, and then it also had columns for how much EM does it put out per unit of cooling or unit of power that it's eating. So those numbers are in there. I cannot, without looking at them in front of my face, I can't tell you what the trends are as far as there will be, a cooler that's actually made for stealth of a larger size will put out a smaller signature than a non-stealth cooler of smaller size. But in general, I think the bigger the cooler, the bigger the signature is my general feeling about it. But
okay, I'll just look it up.
Yeah, Urkel Games /calculator, I think it is the DPS calculator that actually has. They all have those numbers in there because they're all just pulling from the XML database files that come in every time they pump us down a patch. So you can look on there, and those actually calculate those EM signatures and IR signatures for you. I think Hardpoint.io actually breaks them out into EM signature, IO signature. Like, this is for all of these components that you've put into their configurator. This is what that number should be in your display. I think Urkel Games, I think in his summary page it just says EM, but that number is actually the max of EM or IR signature. So he put EM instead of putting SIG. If you actually open up the windows individually on those components and stuff, you can actually see all of the stats individually. So you can drill down into the summary data. You can drill down in there and see down into the. I think he just took a shortcut, not out of laziness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, he just decided that a shortcut was appropriate there.
That's cool.
Yep.
I have another question, which is on that 25-minute base IR cooldown thing. Do you have to be inactive for that to fall? So if you were to say use your engines, or so it just it keeps on sliding no matter what you do.
Right. If you take off and fly for 25 minutes and you're thrusting the whole time, the IR number you're going to read right now is going to be higher than the baseline because you're adding heat the whole time. But but if you then stop, and it'll take 30 or 45 seconds for the heat from your thrusting in your guns and your shields and everything to be bled off by the coolers, that bottom number that it'll come down to and basically stop at is still changes even while you're flying and using the system. It's the minimum limit is what drops. Whether or not you're actually presently at that minimum limit or not, the minimum limit is what's dropping.
Got it.
Yeah. So in other words,
go
ahead.
I also have a question about visual detection. If let's say you're just looking with your eyeballs, does your IR or EM emissions change your visual detectability in any way?
No, not at this point. I don't know what they have planned for design in the future. Right now, if you're outside of, obviously size of the vehicle plays a factor in that.
Of course.
But a typical fighter size target, what we've been in the initial IP training that we've been doing with the guys, where we're just playing Avenger versus Avenger. Mm-hmm. You go outside of about 1,500 meters. Yeah, a kilometer and a half, and the guy's not even being drawn anymore, which is not realistic. He should at least be a few pixels.
Right.
But they just stopped drawing him. Cameral did a test back in 3.9 of sniper rifles, and in first person at 230, I want to say, at 230 meters, it stops drawing the character. So 230 meters, you got these sniper rifles with 8 power scopes on them, and it's just a joke because the guy would step back 1 meter, boop, and he'd just disappear, and step forward 1 meter, boop, and there he was now. So he's trying to do sniper tests at 200 meters. You're like, most of us could hit you with iron sights at that range.
Yeah. Does it seem like there's any prospect for doing that with ships? Sniper rifles versus ships?
You mean using a FPS sniper rifle to damage a ship?
No, to detect that it's there so that you can use your narrow beam ping on it. So
from inside the cockpit?
Maybe from the tail, or from, if you're on a jump ship, maybe from one of those side doors or something. You could put guys around the ship scanning around with their sniper rifles, and when they say, "Oh, I see somebody at 2 o'clock over there," you point your ping at it and ping it narrowly. Maybe you'll still see it even though it's extra stealthy.
I don't know.
That's a
good question.
Range.
That's a great question. I suspect
my intuition is that they are going to have a completely different model for when things appear in visual range than this complicated, emission spectrum thing. And unless they
they have that already
down for performance reasons. Go ahead.
Yeah, they have that already. These detection ranges are only for the sensor package gameplay. That has nothing to do with visuals. Like I said, right now the visuals are also have sort of the same problem that
tuned way down.
Yeah, that the
for
whatever
performance reasons.
OCS culling, bind culling, whatever it is, deletes the visual at sort of a ridiculously short range. But that's done on the client side. So what I might be able to see sitting in the cockpit and what you might be able to see looking out the side door of the Valkyrie, for example, with a sniper rifle, may or may not be the same. We would have to experiment to see that without us being able to. Yeah, it'd be an interesting experiment.
Exploit, yeah.
Without us being able to grab a CIG developer and throwing them in the Ranger chokehold until they confess. So, yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Exnor has a question.
Yeah, man. What you need?
Are there any stealth weapons in game right now?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
If by stealth weapons you mean a weapon, a ship weapon being able to that was made to not be detected.
I need stealth components, so stealth quantum drives and stealth shields, and for the Comet, for instance. But I didn't know that stealth weapons would actually even be a thing.
I don't think they're going to ever be labeled that way, but you can look, just like all the components give out some level of EM and IR signature, and the stealth ones obviously give out a much smaller EM or IR signature. You can look at each individual weapon and see what EM and IR signature that gives out.
It means static, not even being used.
Yeah, even when they're idle.
You start using them.
Yeah, exactly. They did mention some other things that I didn't mention, but I'll mention it now. They did mention in their video that they found some other interesting not anomalies, but some interesting, because it's probably by design, that in the whole powering off things until you need them, that doesn't necessarily get you the same benefit all across the board. That they found that if you power off, for some weird reason, if you power off a ballistic weapon, the ambient baseline signature of a powered off ballistic weapon is much lower than a powered off energy weapon. So powering off your energy weapons gets you a little bit less emission, but not the same percentage change as powering off a ballistic, which is very interesting. So
stands the reason that a laser weapon or energy weapon would have a higher, static energy state than a ballistic would.
Yeah, it makes it sound like their intention is that, powering off your energy weapon doesn't actually take all the power off of it. It just takes it down to some sort of a lower energy, like using a computer as an analogy. It puts it into a sleep mode instead of an actual off mode. Whereas, powering off a ballistic is basically, it really is off, and the only thing, and it goes all the way down to the minimum ambient that you can never get rid of baseline minimum IR sig that we talked about, that they put in there so that there will be a minimum detection distance no matter what.
When we have physicalized components, I bet that could change. Because you could actually go back there and wrench it out of there.
Yeah.
So that it's not even plugged into your ship. Then the question is, does it emit anything when it's just sitting on the deck?
As I understand it, the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. That if you took
it will still emit something.
If you took a component out of your ship and you threw it out the door and it's floating out in space, that component floating out in space will have a minimum IR signature. Just for the sole purpose of gameplay, so that it can be detected even at an exceptionally short range, If it actually had 0, then the game would never see it. You'd never be able to find it. There would be no salvage gameplay, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Your ship's overall minimum completely powered off base IR signature would lower the second you throw that thing out the door, because it's no longer considered to be part of the ship, as I understand it.
And what about sitting on the deck?
Sitting on the deck, it's still in the ship. It's therefore still going to be part of the ship. Part of the ship. Part of the crew. Yeah.
I wonder
So
if crew would
I would
have the same
imagine-
effect.
What was that?
I was saying,
Spacesuits might have a signature too, maybe.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I fully expect. I think this is the way that they're doing all censored detection distances. So like with later on when the Cuddy Red is out there searching for bodies floating around a wreck, looking for survivors. That's going to be what one of your quote life signs detectors is going to be. Is okay, that body has is at minimum IR baseline IR temperature, ergo that guy's dead. That body's at minimum baseline temperature or IR signature, that body is dead. That one's 50 degrees warmer than that. Okay, that guy must be still alive. Let's go over there and save him. That's the way I kind of foresee it. Could be wrong. Absolutely could be wrong, but that makes, based on what those guys did, and obviously they were looking at it solely from the view of ships and components. So, but it stands to reason.
So you might be able to do something interesting with carrying a whole bunch of, say, power plants as cargo, chucking them out the back end. So maybe there's 30 of them out there. So somebody comes along and they see 30 power plants in the asteroid field. What do you think they're going to conclude from that? There's probably 30 ships out there, right?
I doubt it.
No?
Well, it's the fact that those things aren't powered on, so they're at an absolute minimum, which means they're not really going to get seen until you almost hit the thing.
Until they're right on top of them.
Yeah. That minimum IR signature that I talked about, that minimum baseline IR signature, not talking about when your ship is running, about all components and all things have this minimum IR signature, I think is
100 meters or something.
Yeah, you're gonna almost drive up on top of it before you'll be able to see it. Or if you active ping, obviously you'll be able to see it at double with a 1x or 5 times with a. So that's where, I'm kind of seeing indicators that it might be sort of some preludes to salvage. How many C's are in salvage? Salvage gameplay.
In that one last video last week, they did talk about decoys and things like that. So
Yep.
Yeah. We didn't talk about
decoys.
We didn't talk about mines either. Those are essentially stealthy missiles in space, right?
Short answer is I guess so. I mean, the only mines that we've got so far, well, we don't have any mines so far, but the only mine thing that's ever been concept is the Nautilus mine layer. So, and that's not on the roadmap anytime soon. So when that comes in, then we'll find out more. But the concept of it was, that mines were just zero velocity stealthy missiles. They just sit there and let you run into them instead of them flying at you and running into you.
They never activate and go for you when you're too close to get away?
No, there's both. As according to their concept, they'd have some that were they had, I think the explosive ones would have basically a magnetism to them. You get within a certain range and then they start floating towards you. Not fast. It's not like it's a missile. It goes, it has a rocket motor on it. But if you hang out in an area very long, they're going to start propagating towards you. And then they have others that aren't really they're called a mine, but they're not really a mine. They're a droppable turret. They're going to be a drone with guns that doesn't fly around, but it just rotates and shoots at you, which we kind of have already now when you do the claim jumpers missions. They've got those sentry.
That's how the mines in Star Wars work.
Ew.
They're drifters or shooters?
No, they're basically just floating turrets.
Hmm.
Awesome sauce. Any other questions? Let's go fly.
All right.
All right. Thank you very much. That wraps up this installment of Academics with Foghorn. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions I didn't answer, please feel free to contact me via email, Discord, Spectrum, and or the comment section below, and I will answer to the best of my ability as soon as I see it. Members or visitors alike, please hit those follows and subscribe buttons as appropriate, and leave us a comment, as the feedback really does help us. We do actually read it, and we're always striving to improve our content. You can find out more information one day, hopefully in the near future, when AuroraRepublic.space, our wonderful bespoke website, gets back up and running. Or you can find us on Spectrum at robertspaceindustriescom/org/AuroraRep. I'll see you next time. It's Foghorn signing off, wishing you a very pleasant remainder of your morning, afternoon, and or evening. And thank you so very much for watching.